Hi there, this is Jacob Baldry, and you are watching part 3 of Motogadget's official multi-part series on how to install the Mo.unit Blue and many of its accessories. In part 1, we helped you with your shopping list. In part 2, we got your bike ready to install the Mo.unit, and I told you that in part 3, we were going to do 3 things. We were going to show you the skills and tools needed to install the Mo.unit, we were going to show you how it works, and we were going to integrate it into the motorcycle. But I realized that there's actually very little information on how to do a lot of the things we're going to ask you to do, whether that's soldering, using heat shrink, connecting Spade connectors, bullet connectors, Mizu P25 connectors, whatever it may be. And so this episode in part 3 is going to be a standalone video just on the tools and skills required. That way in the future, whenever you need a refresh, you can come right back to this video, and in future videos, I can just say install the Mizu connector, and I don't have to slow us all down and show you how to do it again. This video will always exist. So today in part 3, we're gonna go over the tools and skills needed only. We've got a 4K macro lens camera over here, and I'm gonna try to show you those skills in extreme detail. Let's get into it. Let's start with connectors. When you pick out your connectors, I'd say that you need to pick 2. And this is how I look at it. I pick one connector, which is going to match up with your OEM wiring. You're never gonna get rid of all your wiring, so there's still going to be something that you're gonna want to put a wire back into, swap out of one of the original connectors, something like that. That's often going to be Spade or bullet connectors. On my Honda CB750 behind the camera, that's a bunch of bullet connectors. On this BMW, it is 6.3mm Spade connectors. So we're definitely gonna want to have and know how to use some Spade connectors to connect into the original wiring. The second set of connectors can be the exact same as your original, there's no problem with that, or you can upgrade to some fancy smaller connector like Deutsch pin connectors or Molex connectors. I'm a big fan of the Molex connectors. The crimping process for them is very familiar to a lot of people. The tools to do the crimping is quite accessible, and it lines up very nicely with the connectors found in the Ultimate Builders Pack from Motogadget. Let's start by showing you how to make Spade and bullet connections that match your bike's OEM style. I have some spare red wire around here, so we'll just work with this. Pretend that it's a 12-volt positive cable, and we'll just do one of these 2 spots because we can do, one up here as a positive and then one down here as a negative. This is a 2-pin Spade connector. We also have 6-pin, 4-pin, many other options, but we're just going to do the 2-pin for now, and we're only going to do one of the spots. Let's start with the male, and we can look at this and see there's 2 crimping spots. There's one here and there's one here. What we want is to have the insulation fall into this first one and the bare wire fall into the second one, and no bare wire go past it into this zone. So when we're looking at how much insulation to cut off, you want to be thinking about this zone right here, about that much. I've actually squared that cut off a little bit. It was kind of on the bias. I'm going to take my automatic wire strippers. We have it lined up with about the right amount. Pop it off. If we check our work, we can see that the insulation will land within the first crimp and the bare wire will land in the second. Now, because of our wire thickness, we are going to use the 16 to 14 spot right here. And you'll see that this Spade terminal is much, much thicker than the crimper. So we're going to crimp one spot at a time. And we're going to start with the insulation and then move to that one. So we're going to pop in our 16 to 14 spot. And sometimes, frankly, you're gonna have to bend these a little bit, and that's okay, just to get it started. There it goes. We're just gonna run it in there. And then we check our wire. And what's nice about doing this one at a time is that I can look at that second little crimp spot and see that there is just the bare wire and no insulation, and I can comfortably crimp the first, and then move forward, have the second one, and crimp that nice and tight. We can check our work and see that we have only insulation in this first one, and we have only bare wire in the second. And now, so you want the wire to go in this way. There's a lot more room back here. You'll know that that's the right spot. And obviously you see that this little tang here is what connects with that. So obviously that is the correct direction. And again, let's hear that little click. Nice. That is in place. Now, like a barbed hook, it can't come back out. We'll do the same on the other side, same as before. We'll prime this into the 16 to 14 gauge spot. That can be confirmed with a light pole. So we'll look and see how this connects, just like that. And we have the red wire on the top, so we're gonna want the red wire on the top here as well. Let me just kind of hold that in place and see that actually it is kind of upside down. It wants to be like this because of where that square is located in there. So let's push it in and hear the click. Very nice. And now we can connect these two together. And again, another click. Now, if you choose to use bullet connectors, this is the female end here. The male end is quite round and, I don't know, I guess you could say bullet-like, and slips into this here where it kind of friction fits, where this little female end is supposed to be a slight bit smaller so that it snugs onto the male end. You're looking at the same thing here. 2 spots to crimp, 1 wire to go on. The only thing you really want to remember is that after you're done crimping, the right length, as always, is that you want to slip on its little insulator before you crimp this end. If you crimp this on, this insulator cannot fit over the top. So we're going to feed the insulator over the top there, slide it down, and now we can also use a different set of crimpers here, or wire crimpers, that are much thicker, and you'll see have kind of 2 sets of teeth in there. One set is a little bit larger, and this is made for this spot that grabs the insulation, and one set that's a little smaller, and these are made to grab onto the ends that hold onto the bare metal. So we can take our bullet connector, and again, we're going to have to just slightly squeeze this because it's just a little too wide, and pop it in. And there is a right and a wrong way. You don't want to put those in the wrong way where it squeezes the tight end onto the insulation part. So we're going to put the big end, the big side here. And see how we got a click out of this? Now I don't even have to hold the handles, so we're kind of holding onto this insulation. And we can check the other side and see how perfect of a fit that is. You can see this is the part that grabs the bare metal, that crimp end, and that is on this side here. So now, again, we have our little clear insulator on it. We run this through. Oh, we need to cut it down a little bit. It's a little too long. We don't want anything past that crimp spot. And if I face it towards you, you can see that there. And we're going to crimp this down nice and tight. All the way until it closes and it pops back open. And now we can confirm our work. Insulation grabbed here, bare wire grabbed here. Now we'll take this insulator and we run it back up to the top, and you'll see right here there's this little bump, and this little bump wants to sit over the first crimp that grabbed onto the insulation. And it's not too hard. Even you're just going to kind of put your nails at the end and pull it over the top, and you'll feel it. It's kind of hard to actually rip it all the way off. So you grab the wire and pull here, and you'll hear a, I don't know, vague click. I talked over it. All right, there you go, you hear that? And your male bullet connector will be very similar with how it connects. In fact, identical in how it crimps. Then you're gonna have your male insulator. This is a much smaller guy with the larger end over here and the smaller end around the wire. You'll just slide it up into position like that. Then when you go to connect male and female together, pretend they're on different wires. They just kind of click into place like that. And the 2 insulators engage with each other, creating a watertight seal. Now for that second style of connection that we talked about, I'm going to be using the Molex Mizu P25s. Now, a little note here. If you have limited dexterity in your fingers, problems with fine motor skills, or a vision that restricts your ability to see small, tiny, high detail things, I would skip these connections. I have medium-sized hands, good fine motor skills in the eyes of a young man, and these connectors still make me feel quite a bit clumsy. They are unfathomably tiny little connectors. If you can do it, it's worth it, but it is not necessary. And this here is a Mizu P25 connector. These are the plastic parts, and these microscopic connectors here are the connectors that go onto the wires. You can see that they connect together just like that. Let's start with the spare wire on this side, because this, we have a limitation to how much we can use. If we mess up and we have to keep cutting an inch off every time we mess up, we're gonna run out of wire. This side, we can always get more of it. Let's start with red, so it's easy to see. We're going to straighten it out a bit, and we are going to cut off a very small amount. I'm going to use the male end, and if I show you this little guy here, and I show you the wire, you'll notice there's a small crimp spot right here, and there's another one right here. We want the insulation to be sitting on this first one, and we want bare wire within the second one, and we want no wire past it. And what that means is that we have to crimp a very tiny amount of insulation off to just expose a little bit of wire. So let's do just that. There we go, perfect. Just about a millimeter off the end. And now we are going to take this pair of pliers here, and we're gonna use the 24 to 22 spot. What I like to do, this is very hard to do on camera, is take my male end, and we are going to pre-insert it here. Just like this. You can see at an angle, I want it flush, just like that, and just hold it there in place. Now what's important, I'm gonna flip these around, is that you see this right here, this piece needs to not get crimped. This is what is going to grab into the plastic housing. And if you crimp this and crush it, it's never going to click into the plastic housing. So we need to make sure that, see that gap right there? That's great, we wanna have that gap. Now I'm gonna stand up for this because I just can't see everything at once. But I'm going to stick that wire in just enough that I see it on the other side and I can confirm that it's going to get crimped, get a good grab on it, and then a nice firm squeeze. Now I can confirm my work that I've got the insulation caught in this first crimp and I've got the metal wire caught in the second crimp, and I have not deformed this metal piece here. From there, I'm gonna take my Mizu connector. I have this piece, this little tab facing up, and I'm gonna put it on what I'm just gonna call the far side. That will make more sense when I get to the other side as well. And I'm going to have it so it's facing up like this, and we are going to slide it in past that seal. And we heard a beautiful click. That click means that wire is now in there. We can confirm right in this little window. See how it's yellow in there? That means our seal is still well placed. There is our little metal tab sticking out ready to be the positive wire. Let's move to the other side. What you can also do if yours aren't working that well is you can take a little extra off, and then you can always cut it back down to size. Now the same as before, but we're using the female. The way I know which way is right for putting this guy in, by the way, is I always look at these little tabs and I see that as it slides in, it already starts making it smaller and starts crimping it in, just like that. We gotta confirm that we're not gonna be crimping any, there we go, any of this connector here, because that's where this here, on the other side, but right here, is going to be where it connects into the plastic tab. So we want to make sure that that is outside of the crimp tool. I pop it in and I look on the other side. There we go, there's always a good angle. Right here. And I can see right where that needs to be. And then I crimp down nice and tight. Give it a little tug, and again, we can confirm we have the insulation trapped in the first little crimp spot, and we have the bare metal wire trapped in the second. So we are going to take this connector and we are going to have it with this side up. So the crimps are on here, and we're gonna have that facing down. We have the side without the crimp ends on top, and we have our little Mizu connector here with that spot for the tab facing up, and we are going to put this in the outside one, not the inside, the outside, because that's how we looked at it for the other one as well, and we're going to push it through that seal. And if you have problems with the seal, you can always just pop that seal out, run it over the wire, then push it in, and we're going to hope for that click. Beautiful, we got a click out of it again. We have a nice strong connection. We can look through that window. We see we have a little yellow, which means the weather seal is still in place. Looks beautiful. Let's connect this up. And there you have the positive wire connected through the Mizu P25. You would then, just on the inside or on the other open spot, you'd connect the black wire to have ground. I will remind you that this is 100% optional and that you could look at the Mo.unit as the quick disconnect right there. It's just a little extra wire and a little extra routing through the handlebars. This is just if you want to go connector crazy, and frankly, I'd rather show you things that you decide not to do rather than forget to show you things that you end up wanting to do. Now, sometimes you need to connect one wire to another, but you want it to be permanent. You don't ever need to take it apart. Maybe you're just trying to make a wire longer. Maybe you want to connect two wires into one, and for that, we're going to learn how to solder. we're gonna strip off about a 1/2 inch or so. I've been soldering for about half my life. This is the way I prefer to do it, though you can look up, there's like a NASA spec for soldering wire, but for what we're doing, this is the way I like to do it. This gets me the best results, strongest connections, lowest interference, and the least amount of poke through in the insulation. So we have our 2 wires, and they are now nice in length. You could even make them a touch longer if you wanted. But before we close these off, I'm going to assume that the other ends are meeting up with something. So we're gonna take a piece of heat shrink, we're gonna run our heat shrink over the top of it and down the end of the wire. Now that we have our heat shrink on, because we can't add it later, we're gonna take these, we're gonna take them like an X, we're going to cross them over each other and spin them around. Now you want them to look kind of like that, but I'm gonna leave that little ugly guy so you can see what we do if we have something like that by the time we're done soldering. That's already a nice little connection, not one I'd ever trust, but it is a nice connection. And now we're going to solder it on. To take our soldering iron, we're going to clean the tip off with this, I don't know, what is this, brass, little coil wire. Clean it off like that until it's nice and shiny. And I have some soldering iron here. This is my favorite. I've had this for over a decade easily. If there's ever a house fire, I'm coming back for my Radio Shack lead-free flux cord solder. What I do is I like to kind of like wrap it around my fingers a little bit and create this little tool, this little poker tool that I have, which is quite nice. And then I'm gonna have to stand up for this. This is very hard to do when these aren't actually connected to anything and they're just floating in the world, but we're gonna get it done. And to be clear, this is 5/100 of an inch lead-free electrical solder. We're going to apply some to the tip of the soldering iron, just enough to help transfer the heat from the iron to the wires themselves. And see, we're testing on top of that wire, maybe a little bit more solder. Okay, there we go. See how it is melting across? We're just gonna push our solder along the top of the wire, following the heat and helping it flow through all of the wire. Now what we've got here is a beautiful soldered connection. It's still shiny, there's no big globs. If it was matte finish or there's big globs, I'd say it's kind of a cold solder. You can still see the individual strands underneath. We could honestly probably add maybe even like 5% more solder. I'm okay with a little copper color showing, and again, I could probably hold myself by this with how strong this is, so this will not be the weak point. Now, remember I added this little spot here. And that is intentionally wrong. You don't actually want to do that. You want to try to smooth out those wires as much as possible so it looks more like this side over here. But just in case this does happen, I want to show you what we're going to do, which is we're going to take our wire cutters, we'll just come right up to it and we'll snip it off. Now if we added heat shrink over the top of this, this is quite sharp. It's scratching my finger. So we cut it off, but now we need to take this little file and we're going to file those sharp edges off. Oh yeah, see, I can cut a little more off and then file it again. There we go, nice and smooth. That is a beautiful solder joint if you asked me. Again, if I was to self-critique, I'd say you could go maybe 5–10% more solder. We got a little copper color showing through on the edges. I maybe ran it a little too hot, so I was afraid to melt the insulation on the sides, because that's what will happen if you hold the soldering iron on here for long enough. It'll just start melting away and wicking off all this insulation. So I maybe worked a little too quickly, but man, that is pretty solid right there. I'd have no problem running this on the bike. From here, we'll just run that piece of heat shrink right over the top. You kind of want it to be even on both sides, right? You don't want to just set it right there on the end, somewhere in the middle. We take our heat gun, and that is a soldered connection that will last as long as your motorcycle. Now, of course, you're going to want to connect a bunch of wires into your Mo.unit. Let me show you how to do that. So we need to connect wires into this Motogadget Mo.unit Blue, and you see there are lots of terminals along here that we can plug wires in. And you know what? You won't go to jail if you just take the wire, twist it, and shove it into the spot. It's not the cleanest. It's not really recommended by me, but you can do that if you'd like. You could also take this end and you could solder it, so it's just more of a solid piece, and plug that in. All we need is a really good connection. I think any creative way that you want a good connection is totally fine, but really what is a great way is these wire ferrules here. This is a terminal set by iWis, and this, like everything else we're using, can be found at motogadget.com. And we're gonna be using these little guys and this Really cool tool. Look at that, the way it crimps down a square the whole time. What we'll do, because there's a bunch of different sizes, that's what every color means, is we're going to find the smallest wire ferrule available that still lets this slip into the metal part. Let me show you what I mean. If we take this one here and we run it over the top, yeah, I'd say that one's maybe a little too big. Let's go down to gray. We can slip that in, and again, it's just too big. What else we got? Let's try a blue. That's looking pretty close. Slip the blue in, and I can see the end, so I know if I go like this and it doesn't go all the way, it's not gonna fit. Almost. I think the blue is gonna be the one. Let's see. Yeah, the blue is the one. The blue fits really, really nicely. But let's try one up. We can go up to, let's see, a black and see how that fits. That's comfortable too. I don't know, why don't we go with a black? I got no problem with that. You can see it there at the end. Now, how much do we cut off when it comes to this? Because I just kind of winged it a little bit, but I'd recommend that you don't go too long and you don't go too short. Let me show you what happens when you do. If we go too long and we have a ton of exposed wire and we stick it in here, well, that's no good. Who would want this at the end of their terminal or at the end of their ferrule? That would just look pretty messed up, right? So we don't want to go too long. But then why don't we just play it on the safe side and have it be a little extra short? Okay, so we're gonna have that much wire there. And let me pop this in, and I'll show you this in more detail in a moment. We just pop it in there, pop this in, close it off. Well, look at this. Does this look like a good connection to you? Nice this way. Does that look good like that? There's clearly no wire in there. That's nearly becoming two-dimensional because yes, it's holding on, but boy, is that fragile because there's just nothing in there. The wire went that far. So instead, we really do want to make it the exact length of the metal available. So something like that. What's nice is if you're gonna do a bunch of these, you can take your strippers and you can adjust the size to fit your wire ferrule and run it up against that piece of clear plastic. How about that? That looks pretty good. Let me twist this up and see. The test will be when we put it on, does it come out the end? It doesn't. Perfect. Look at that. You can see the copper just right up to the end there, but not sticking out. That's doing great. So now let's go ahead and connect our ferrule. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take this tool here and we're gonna just close it up and only put in the metal of the ferrule, but all the metal. Just like that. So you can see that the plastic insulation is not in this. I don't care how far it went on the other side. It's deep in there. It's not all the way to the end of this. It's not flush, that's fine. We're just focusing on making sure that this black insulation, that we don't shove it in and start clamping it like that. That would seriously damage the connector. And now I kind of hold this closed with my hand, just give it a little light pressure as I then stick this in. I can feel the insulation hit the bottom of the little funnel. And now I'm going to clamp this all the way closed. It kind of has a torque spec on it that it pops back open when it's done. Just like that. Now we have a nice clean crimp on this guy. It's not coming off. And as we take our Motogadget Mo.unit and we pop it into its spot, look at how nice and clean that is. We could add a piece of heat shrink if we wanted to be fancy, to have this really sealed off nice and weather tight. And this is the ferrule and how we connect it there. For the record though, on the input side, you will probably find me using the blue color more than anything. I just like the way they seat in there. They seem to seat a little bit better. Keep in mind that the output sides are much larger, requiring much larger wires, and will pick much larger ferrules to go in its place. Another skill you'll want to have is to know how to connect ring terminals and the like. These will help you connect wires to the battery or to the negative and positive sides of the Mo.unit, and if you want to use crimp connectors over the spade or bullet connectors, the yellow ring terminal will show you the same process. Ring terminals, battery lugs, there's two ways to connect onto a bolt or something similar. They both require wire going into them, but they get crimped on a little differently. So let's look at the difference. In here, underneath this yellow sheathing of this little ring terminal is the same thing we've been seeing, where it is a little crimp spot. It has a split in it, and that causes this to fold over. Now, the color is usually coordinated with the gauge of wire. So you can see this yellow one is quite large, holds a big wire. I wouldn't be running some wire like this into this guy, I'd be running some thicker wire. Otherwise there's red colors, blue colors. Kind of the name of the game is find the smallest size that still fits the bare wire. Even this wire is a little too small, but I'm trying to save some of my good copper, so excuse me. What you have here is you have the insulation, and you see that it kind of goes down quite a ways, and then it hits that crimp spot. You'll want to have just enough bare metal exposed, bare wire exposed, that is inside the crimp spot, and then the insulation fills into this zone. You can kind of see the taper. It looks like about there is to insulation, and then about there is bare metal. That is looking pretty good to me right there. This is where this tool comes into play. Look at this guy, color coordinated and everything. Yellow, blue, and red depending on the gauge you're using. We're using a yellow, and as you've seen, I like feeding in the little connector first, then the wire after, so that I'm only holding on to two things at any given time. That's now clicked on nicely. You can also find on most sets of strippers, see these dots? Yellow, blue, and red? Guess what those do? Same thing, just the big old squish tool. Just make sure you don't put it in the razor blade spot. From here again, I'm gonna stand up on this one. If you want, you can always kind of place the end of your handles on here and just press down on it. Makes it a little easier and it's not such a grip strength tester. We're gonna pop this guy in, and I'm gonna look on the other side here. You can see where the wire is exposed, and I'm gonna line it up nicely. Start squishing. And again, I'm just gonna use the edge of the table here, all the way down, open it up, look at it, give it a good pull. That is a nice connection. You've got a ring terminal. This here is a battery lug. It's like a ring terminal's fancy bespoke cousin. And you're gonna use it for thicker wire. Really, yellow's kind of the biggest that you go. And this is some real thick wire. This is why they call it kind of a battery lug, because it's really connecting to battery, which means real thick gauge wires. So thick that this wire stripper won't work. It's not gonna fit in here. So what we're gonna do is take our wire cutters that look like this. I don't know, steal your dad's cigar cutters if you don't wanna grab this. And we're just gonna do this the old fashioned way, same as before. We're gonna measure how much we need, about that much. And go a little on the shy side. If you go too far, you're gonna have to cut some off because we don't want a big weak spot. I'll show you what I mean. I'm just kind of lightly applying pressure while I spin it around, and I probably didn't even cut through. See, I didn't, but what you do is you snap it. Can you even hear it? Almost, but you can see that I'm tearing that rubber insulation the final bit of the way. That way I didn't even touch those copper strands. Pop that off. Now look at this. If I have too much and I pop this on, even though it goes on as far as it can, that is an icky connection. No matter how I crimp that, even with heat shrink, it's just very weak. I don't even want to make a mess. I'm not cutting that. That's like a million strands of wire. I'm just gonna go to the other side and do it right. Measure, cut about here. Again, one couple little spins, applying a little pressure, just enough to get the line built in, and then I bend it, and that snaps it off the rest of the way. You can do that for any wire size, actually. I've honestly done that with a folding knife and my thumb and cut wire that way, but you didn't hear that from me. That's not a recommendation. Now you can see, you can slip this on, and the insulation butts up right against it. Gosh, how pretty is that? And this is from the battery lug kit that you can get at motogadget.com. Keep that in mind. And it comes with all the heat shrink. For this one, we're gonna use a tool so big that the macro camera really isn't even the way to go. This is again from iWis, and again can be found at Motogadget. I'm gonna open it up and swap it to the size that I want. Now it often adds a little like spine on top of it, so I try to have this go in kind of nice and at an angle so that the spine is in one spot. The more perfect of a size you find, the less little spine you get, but it's a balancing act, I'll admit. Once we have the lug in here, we just clamp these down all the way closed. Pop it back open. Yeah, that looks perfect. Love how that came out. Again, give it a little pull test. Don't be afraid of it. If you can't pull it now, it shouldn't be going on your bike. And that's a battery lug. Again, we can put a little piece of heat shrink right over the top of it if you'd like. Sometimes it's used for its functional insulating properties. Other times it's used just to give it a nice clean look. But either way, you're gonna wanna know how to use heat shrink. This here is heat shrink. These are two different sizes, but they do the same thing. All they do is they, when heat is applied, shrink down to insulate a wire and its connector and whatever else it's covering. It's very simple, but it kind of seems like magic and it's fun to use. So let me show you how to do it, because you could be using it everywhere. A few different things to consider for heat shrink before we get into it. One is that there is usually a shrink rate or shrink ratio. This is most commonly 2:1, meaning this here will get half its size once shrunken in diameter. So if you have a wire that is very, very tiny, this will still not hug it. It does not just infinitely shrink until it grabs something. It only shrinks to half its size. This here is the same thing. It'll only shrink to half its size. It's 2:1 ratio. You can get 4:1 ratio. I think you can get 6:1 ratio, which means it shrinks down to 1/6 of its size when open normally. Pretty cool. Secondly, it's worth noting that you can get it in colors. You can get it in clear, but black is the most common and the easiest to find. Third is that you can get this, which is just plain, there's no adhesive on the inside, or you can get adhesive lined, which is great to use when you're holding on sleeving and other things so it can actually grab closed. You rarely need it for connectors and stuff, but I suppose you could use the adhesive line stuff for everything. It just makes it a little harder if you made a mistake and you want to remove it. I've lived my whole life with the non-adhesive style and I've been just fine. But as we get into sleeving things, I'll probably start looking into getting a little bit of the adhesive style and the 4:1 style. It just seems too fun to not try out. I'm going to heat shrink two things for you. I'm going to heat shrink this battery lug and this little wire ferrule here. The rule, as it has always been, is to find heat shrink as small as possible, but as big as necessary. This just barely fits the wire ferrule, and that's exactly what we want. We don't want any bigger because we hope that it does shrink down over everything, because look, it's quite big around the wire. There are two ways to heat shrink. One is the right way, the other is the wrong way. The wrong way to do it, which is with a lighter. But you know, so many of you guys do it, I kind of have to show you how to, because as much as I tell you to use a heat gun, not all of you are going to. To use a lighter, some would prefer a Zippo because you can stand it on its end and it stays lit even when you're not touching it. You are going to want to put your insulation over the top here and keep it very, very far away, almost out of camera far away. And you're going to want to spin it frequently. It's like toasting a marshmallow. Hold it in one spot too long and you'll burn through it. I'll mention again, I'd rather you not do it this way, but if I can't stop you, I might as well have you do it correctly. Fast spinning, away from the flame, moving quickly, and you can see it is shrinking quite nicely. Just like that. No burn marks, no melt points, nicely shrunken. Oh, and if my point's not clear, this is about how fast it can go wrong. Just like that. We just burnt it. And now it's got char on it. Do it for a couple seconds longer. Just like that, we've boiled the wire. To do it the right way, it's very simple. We're gonna turn this heat gun on and we're gonna watch this shrink around it. We're just gonna wanna make sure that the wind from the heat gun doesn't blow the insulation off of the thing we're trying to heat. So you'll find you don't often want to try to use heat shrink at an angle like this. You're gonna want it to be nice and flat so that it just curls and spins and slowly shrinks onto the part we want. I'm gonna turn my heat gun on high. Simple as that. It's now heated on there, and you can see that I could get as close as I wanted and really kind of stay as long as I needed to get it nice and shrunken. Nice even finish, and nothing is burned. That is every skill I can think of. If there's any other skill that you're going to run into while installing the Mo unit, so long as you know everything in this video, I don't think there is anything that you can't do. In part 4, which is coming up very shortly, we'll show you how the Mo unit works, and we will actually get it integrated into the motorcycle, and we will get the motorcycle running to prove to ourselves that we did it correctly. Until then, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok for shorter, faster content, and of course, you can find all the products and manuals at motogadget.com or motogadget.us.